And now, a show with inappropriate language, The Powell Movement.
Welcome to The Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I'm heading on vacation. While I normally spend 2 to 3 weeks at Rehoboth Beach with about 20 or so family members, the virus has taken that away. This will be the first summer in at least 12 years where I won't walk the boardwalk with an oversized stuffy from winning at the ring toss. While you know that I'm really fast at drinking beer, another hidden talent that I'm known for is that I'm freakishly good at the ring toss and other boardwalk games. I win every year. At least I used to be known as that. When you blow your own horn, and God, I wish I could blow my own horn, but when I do that, I usually jinx myself. But enough about games. As I mentioned last week, we quarantined with another family, and when you listen to this, we'll be sitting in the sun on Deer Lake. Funny thing is, we don't even know where that is. We just searched for an Airbnb on a lake, and there were like 3 spots left, so we booked the one on Deer Lake. So this week is all about not thinking about all the bad things happening in this country. The systematic oppression, the anti-maskers, the racists, the fucking idiots. I'll save that for another day, because this is America, and unfortunately, that shit isn't going anywhere. Speaking of going places, my guest this week, Lance Hakker, is a guy I met when his life and times were just about to start going places. I met Lance when he was fresh out of college and he was hired for the team manager position at K2 Snowboarding. And he was a much different team manager than the guy before him, Ryan Runke. Runke's been on the podcast, and while Ryan is a personality, Lance chose to hide behind the scenes and produce some pretty influential things along the way. Before we get into the podcast, I need to thank Styx over at Liquid Death Mountain Water for sending over some cases of water. If you still drink water out of a plastic bottle, you are part of the problem. Get yourself a Stanley or drink some Liquid Death. Speaking of Stanley, I want to thank them and 10 Barrel for supporting the show even during these tough times. It means a lot, so please take advantage of the deals that I have in the ads during the show. I'd also like you to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it, tell a friend about the show, and buckle up for another business episode with Lance Hakker. You have an identical twin brother, Mike Hakker, and the funny thing to me about your name is, are you Lance Michael Hakker?
So my dad's name is Michael Leonard Hakker, and then my uncle's name is Lance. So they liked my uncle's name, so they had my name picked out. Back then, they didn't do like ultrasounds unless there's like an emergency or something.
Sure.
So they do the heartbeat, but Mike and I, our heartbeat was at the same time. So they just didn't know my parents were having twins. So they had my name picked out, went in the hospital, and the nurse took one look at my mom and was like, "You're having twins." And Mom was like, "No, I'm not." And so she's like, "I'm getting the doctor." The doctor comes in, they're like, "Yes, you're having twins." And they rushed her into an emergency C-section. My brother's first. And so my parents named after my dad. So he's Michael Leonard Hakker the second. And then since my name was already picked out, my dad's name was going to be my middle name. They just stuck with it as is. And it's funny too, because we didn't have names at first because of that. Because there's only one name. So we're A baby and B baby, which is like normal for twins, right? Is to call them A baby and B baby when something like this happens. Years later, when I'm in like high school, there's these 2 girls that lived in Corona where I grew up mostly, and they're AB and BB and they're twins. And the whole time I'm like, I guarantee they're A baby and B baby and their parents named the AB and BB, which is really cool in my opinion. So they had the same exact scenario.
And their parents just were not creative or super creative and just took the name that was written on it. Like if your name was female and your parents named you Famali.
Yeah. To go with the flow like that is pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you spent most of your time in Corona. I think you were born in Hawaiian Gardens. You moved to Moreno Valley, and then you moved to Corona. That's where you spend most of your life. And childhood for you, you've got your twin brother and mom and dad together. Is it a normal childhood?
Super normal, yeah. Like when we were younger, we didn't have a lot. Dad worked super hard, so we were pretty comfortable like as we got older. But I think that we had a more like reciprocal relation with our parents than maybe a lot of kids.
I don't even know what that means. You had a more reciprocal life with your parents. Like you actually did work or something like that?
My parents always put us first. And we just did everything we could to be good kids in kind. We never had that like angst and that pushback against our parents to be individuals. We never had that because, like I said, there's reciprocity. Like we worked together, we understood each other's wants and needs. And obviously, that's not because my brother and I were so insightful at a young age. It's like my parents did a really good job. So, yeah, it was pretty easy, pretty normal life growing up.
Well, you make it sound like you guys are easy, but it sounds like you were really a pain in the ass. Like at 1.5 years old, you guys jumped into a pond at Knott's Berry Farm, and that freaked the shit out of your mom. Like you could have died there.
We were good, but active.
Just like kids with stitches all the time and breaking arms and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like crash and burn. Like, for example, one of us would have the hammer when we were like 2 or however little we were, and we'd hit the wall and put a hole in the wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then my parents would come and tell whoever did it not to do it, and then go put the hammer away. And then we'd go over, and the one who did it and was told no, that person, we'd tell the other one, hey, I can't do it, but here's the hammer. And the other one would do it.
It just sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah.
For a parent who has to worry about a kid jumping, you were jumping off the high dive, it sounds like, at 2 years old or 3 years old.
Yeah.
Where like the old kids are crying and you guys are jumping off, but you can't even talk.
The high dive thing's funny because just recently I was arguing with my friend Ben because he was saying that's not possible. And so I went back through my parents, all their old photos, and I found a photo of us. I don't think I found the one of us actually jumping, but we're like holding our arms out and like walking on the high dive about to jump to prove it. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. And then for you, skateboarding and snowboarding are really what drives you or your passions. And I think that starts around 7th grade-ish. Skateboarding is easy to get into. It's super accessible. Anybody can go skateboard as long as you have the gear. How do you get into snowboarding? That's a little bit harder. You have to make an effort.
Yeah, so they're linked for me and my brother. The first time I saw someone on a new school skateboard was when I was in 6th grade, or maybe even like that summer between 6th and 7th. I don't know. I was little.
Okay.
There's this dude on a new school skateboard because all I ever had before that was like the big directional, like vert. I work at a skateboard company and I can't even think of like what you would call those boards because back then it was just a skateboard. So that's all we had. And I saw this guy on this little popsicle stick board and he did a shove it, which obviously I didn't know what it was. He just did a little shove it on his board. And it is to this day one of my most lucid memories. Like I remember it and I remember what it felt like. I freaked out. I mean, I didn't freak out, but like it knocked my socks off and that's all I could think about. And then right after that, like after I'd never seen him before, I go to my aunt's house and I had 2 older cousins, but not much older, you know?
Yep.
One of them, the younger one, had a skateboard and they were always surfers, but we weren't by the beach, so surfing wasn't really a thing for us. And he did a kickflip. So going from seeing some random person do a shove it to right after seeing like my cousin, who I'm really close with, do something even crazier in the backyard.
Yeah.
That was game over. And so, yeah, got into skateboarding, obsessed with it, just like every other kid that gets into it.
Well, it sounds like you obsess with it and your brother is into it and thinks it's fun, but with all the things that you obsess with, your brother just thinks they're cool and he's like, yeah, that's fun. Let's do this. But you're fully obsessed and know everything about all the tricks and just totally break down the sport. And is there a big difference between you and Mike and just how you look at these sports and everything?
Yeah, I guess I never thought about it that way because he was never as into skateboarding as I was. There wasn't skate parks back then, really. So we skate this one school every day, and there's like a forest there kind of right when you enter. And he like tried to ollie it and then just hang out the rest of the time. Which is funny because he's like very, very naturally talented person. Like even snowboarding, I'd say he's more naturally talented than I am. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. That could be true. Like, yeah, I guess as far as like the details, I dive into the culture of things a little more than he does, maybe.
I mean, it just sounds like he thought all the shit was cool. And then hearing you say that he's got all this talent, you have talent, but you're super passionate and obsessed. And that dude who's obsessed is going to have more drive to do it more. Where the dude who's not obsessed is just like, yeah, when I'm done having fun, I'm just going to sit down and watch everybody else.
Honestly, like that does make sense. I have a good example of how that mindset works. And it was kind of eye-opening. When we were trying to be pro snowboarders, when we were like 19, my first year of college, we went to Chapman University, which is a really great school. And in hindsight, I wish I would have just stayed and finished up there. Like that winter, I came back home from snowboarding or maybe out of school, and I was like, I have to move to Utah. Like, I can't do this. I'm not going to go another year just riding Snow Summit, which Snow Summit was amazing. But
the scene's happening in Utah.
Yeah, it's like the Hollywood of, at the time, the Hollywood of snowboarding. So I go to my parents' room, like, Mom and Dad, like, I'm sorry, but I have to move to Utah. And they knew by like how serious I was that there was no stopping it. So they just supported it. So when I did that, my brother went, Nima Jalali went, Mike Tobia went, and our friend Derek went. Me and my brother, and then Nima and Mike Tobia, both in the same apartment complex. And ultimately, my brother and I, we were going to school. We never became pro snowboarders. We had kind of like dual focuses. And Nima became a pretty popular pro snowboarder.
Yep.
And then years later, once like we were doing Ashbury or whatever, one day Nima's like, dude, yeah, because you would go to bed at night and you'd like sleep and wake up and go to school. It's like, I couldn't sleep because I wanted it so bad. Like, you never wanted it that bad. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, that's true. He wasn't saying it in like a negative way towards me. He was just saying like, dude, I wanted it so bad that I couldn't sleep. Because me and Nima, we came up together and we're very different snowboarders.
Right.
But had very similar trajectories. And ultimately, he went on to do really great things as a pro snowboarder. And I didn't. And the difference was how bad you want it. And I see it all the time now. One guy could be an A+ talent, one guy could be a B- talent, and the B- could be one of the biggest things ever, and the A- doesn't ever do anything. And it makes sense, like how it's your drive.
I mean, I agree with you, but I also feel like with you and your brother, there was also a path that you guys had where it was like you were giving pro snowboarding a chance, but there was also the school path, and you knew that school was going to be a part of it. Where Nima, it seemed like he was putting a lot more eggs in one basket, where you guys were spread a little bit thin, but that's way further in your career, so I'm going to reel it back in. How do you even get into snowboarding?
Yeah, so we started going when I was maybe 9. We'd go on a ski trip once a year because my aunt and uncle got a cabin. So we'd go ski, and it was just like whatever. I didn't care. It was like we had to go ski during the day, and then it was fun to hang out at the cabin at night.
Yeah.
And two of my aunts had monkeys, so at night we hang out in the cabin, and the monkeys, for some reason, they would just let them free in the house.
Who has monkeys, man? Like, everybody dreams of having monkeys, but I don't know anybody that really has them.
Yeah, two of my aunt and uncles had monkeys. They were in Vegas one time. I was so little, I don't remember. But they're the white-faced capuchins that, like, if you go to Costa Rica, you'll see them. So I just never cared about skiing. Like, it just didn't mean anything to me. And then after I started skating, we went up, and my two cousins went, and they're on snowboards. And I didn't know what it was. I just saw that I was on skis and they were on, like, I considered it a skateboard basically. How come they get to be on a skateboard on the mountain and I got to be on these skis? That was it. So the next year I started snowboarding. So it was my first year snowboarding and my second year skating. And I just picked up on it really fast. So even though skateboarding is always a part of my life, and skateboarding was a bigger fork in the road for me than snowboarding was, skateboarding is the decision in my life that changed all of my decisions in my life. Snowboarding, it was a part of that decision. But I became way more into snowboarding. To this day, I have more love for snowboarding than I do skateboarding, even though I don't do it as much.
Yep.
But yeah, I fell in love with it, and that's all I could do. And if I grew up in Bend, Oregon, and you're really into snowboarding, you're probably going, if you're in high school, 40, 50 days. For me in high school, until I got a driver's license, I was going 10 to 15 days a year.
Yep.
And we were the snowboarders at our school. And once we got a driver's license, then we went more. But it's a 2-hour drive to the mountain. So there's no midweek snowboarding, going up night riding after school or whatever. But yeah, it changed everything. I was obsessed with it.
You know, what's funny too is that in high school for you, I would think that if you played any sports at all, that you would be a track and field guy. And I think you did that. I think you were on the track team.
I did, yeah.
But one thing I would never, ever peg you for is a high school football player who played both ways. And that was you as well. You did that for a couple years.
I think just crashing into your friends with like pads, like that's something that I wanted to do. And we were so little. Our freshman year, we had a frosh soft team because we were a new school. It was supposed to be like a magnet school.
Yep.
And I played cornerback. And then the second year, I started both sides. I was 125 pounds. And I started offense and defense on the varsity team. And we didn't have seniors. So we were just getting pummeled.
You eventually quit football. I'm guessing it's to focus on snowboarding.
Mm-hmm.
And when you turn 16 and you get a license, that's the biggest year of your life, I would think, because, or maybe not the biggest year of your life, but a huge year in
Big
snowboarding
deal.
for you, because that's the year you meet Nima up at Snow Summit.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the year you're putting together an edit and you go to Extreme Board Shop. It's your local shop, and you show them your sponsor me video and they're like, nope. And then you go to Active and you end up getting sponsored there. How does that work out?
We met Nima, and when I met Nima, it was funny because at the time he was this little guy, and I'd be like, that guy's so good. And his whole crew that he ran with was really good. So I started talking to him, and he's like, I just turned 15. I was like, I just turned 16. We were the same grade, but he's basically a year younger than me. But I never realized, even though I thought he was so good, he only did straighters and backside 360s, and he couldn't even grab his backside 360. He would just do like a no grab backside 360. But he did it so well and so consistent that maybe if he wrote down his trick list, it wasn't really impressive. But, you know, as we know now, like, that doesn't matter. Like, it's how you snowboard, not what you do.
Yeah.
And if you looked at my trick list at that time when I was 16, I could do all kinds of different things, but I wasn't as good as him in a lot of respects. As we got older, you kind of see the difference in snowboarding. Like, everything that he had, like, he almost had no flukes. Any trick he had in his video part, or any trick you saw him do, like, nothing was a fluke or like I'm feeling it, so I just did it this time. It's like everything was within the realm of like what he was able to do because he built such a solid foundation. But yeah, so met him, we started snowboarding a bunch, and meeting him and then all his friends, because like I said, they're all really good. That changed everything for us because now all of a sudden we had more people to challenge ourselves.
Yeah.
And everyone else was really good. Mike Tobia, he actually was a pro for a little while. Adam and Kevin Sheedy, Adam Sheedy was easily the best of all of us, but they just went down different paths. And then we had our friend Nate Kelly. He was like our filmer. So all of a sudden we had more people to snowboard with and challenge ourselves and kind of aim at the same place together.
Yeah.
And we had a filmer, and then, try to get on Extreme. They were kind of down, but I think they didn't take it seriously because they just didn't realize it. And then Active worked out super easy. Funny, our filmer, Nate, he's a movie producer now. Like, he just did that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
No way.
Yeah, he works on all kinds of big stuff.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, he's crazy. I told him this recently because we were talking about something, and I was like, I would never wish your work ethic on my worst enemy.
He just doesn't stop.
It's crazy.
But that's how the most successful and the best people, like, you can look at talent, and a lot of people have talent when you get to a certain level. But the best are the dudes that never stop. They go over and over and over and over and over again, and it's just ridiculous. You know, like the Travis Rices of the world. He didn't get where he is just because he's talented. It's because he works harder than everybody else too. For
sure, yeah. I'm like being hyperbolic when I say it, but it's like we had a good crew, and it was fun, and it changed everything for us.
And then the story of your first board sponsor is pretty random as well. It sounds like it was a 2-year process that started with you answering a trivia question because you're a Grom and know everything about everything in snowboarding. So how does this work out?
That was so funny. I hadn't thought about this in a while. So we went to Hike a Skid Snowboard Camp and met Casey Nelson, who was a really, really good snowboarder. He ended up being on Tech 9, having a few video parts in the Tech 9 videos. And we made this crew called Fry Sauce Crew, FSC, which the reason we named it that, because we were arguing with Casey about whether fry sauce existed. Whatever, just stupid kid argument.
Yep.
Turned into a crew. And then that winter, it was basically all of us California kids and then Casey, who lived in Park City. And he hits us up, he's like, hey, I learned how to make websites because the snow's been bad. Should I make an FSC website? And we're like, yeah, sure, whatever. And so we sent him a couple video clips, and he made a site that each of us had our own page with a couple clips, and not even a couple photos, like a couple screen grabs from some clips. So he made that, and then Sims was like redoing their whole team because it wasn't really cool at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then Travis Wood, who was like the marketing guy behind Forum, like that dude was basically a celebrity to me as far as I was concerned, because I knew that he was the guy behind a lot of what Forum was doing. And he got in there and he changed a bunch of things, and they put this, I think it was like the back cover of the magazine. It had a list of a bunch of really good snowboarders, and it's like, guess which guys are on the team for a chance to win something, whatever, I don't know. To me, not that I knew who was on, but I knew what was feasible just by what made sense. Like, who could they actually get? Who would actually do it? So I got it right. I sent it in, and I ended up getting second place. Just probably they had to pick 1, 2, or 3. So Sims sends me like a pair of bindings. That's the second place thing, which ended up being I gave it to my dad. That was my dad's bindings. But then, like a couple months later or something, they sent a massive box of T-shirts to my house, and we were like, "What?" But it's not as easy to get a hold of people as it is now. Like now, you'd be able to just email someone or whatever. But we were barely using the internet back then. Like I was still using encyclopedias for my schoolwork and whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think we probably gave some T-shirts away. They probably just sat there, and then they tracked it and called my mom. And one of the guys is like all pissed off and like, "You got to send the T-shirts back," because he probably messed up and he's probably supposed to send these shirts to like some contest or a rep or something. And we're like, "Well, I don't know what you want us to do," and we already gave some away. And then through them seeing that they sent it to me, they started researching like, who is this guy? And they found our website. It was the-fsc.com. And they're like, "Oh, okay." Like these guys have, at the time to have a website, like where there's 2 snowboard websites, Transworld and the FSC.com. So I get an email from FSD Woody. FSD is like 4-star distribution.
Yeah.
Which was form. And then Woody, like Travis Wood, at AOL.com. So it's not even like a Sims email or anything. It's just some random AOL email. And when I saw it, I thought it was some like spam, like porn.
So you clicked on it?
No, I was going to delete it. I was like, oh God. And I was like, wait a second. Whatever. I clicked it and it was Travis Wood. So like I said, it was like literally like of all like the snowboard behind the scenes people, the darkman, he was the number one guy to me. And he wants me to call him. No context, just like, "Hey Lance, don't worry about that box. Will you call me?" So I tell my brother and Nima and Mike Tobia what happened. And I'm like shook. And Nima's like, "I'll call him and I'll pretend to be you." and and I was like, all right. So Nima sits down at our dining room table. And me and my brother and Mike Tobia are standing around. We don't have any connection in snowboarding, right?
You're just kids.
We're just kids. And he is on the phone. He's like, uh-huh. And he's sitting there and he looks up at me and he looks like, oh my God. Like he's kind of tripping. He's like, okay, yeah. And he goes to the phone. He's like, "Dude, they want you to ride for Sims."
Holy
and we
shit.
couldn't believe it. And so they reached out to 3 of us. Or how'd it go? Because Tech 9 ended up reaching out to us too about that, whatever. But yeah, so through that, I ended up getting on Sims and Tech 9. And then Nima got on Tech 9. And then I got Nima on Sims like right after that. And that story to me was like perfect for me too, because I always liked the business people behind things.
Yep.
Like my friend Austin Stevens, who was a pro skater for a while, like on Toy Machine, he had voicemails from Jamie Thomas and Ed Templeton back in the day, because Jamie wanted him on Zero and Ed wanted him on Toy. And they called, might have been the same day, and got voicemails on his mom's, like, or on the house phone.
That's heavy for a day.
Heavy, for sure. But for me, Travis Wood was like the equivalent. That was my Ed Templeton and Jamie Thomas. It was a really cool beginning.
Now it's time for me to take a sponsor break. And I love Stanley. They have been around for over 100 years, and they have always stood behind their products because they're the best. I'm not just saying that. I use the water bottles and pint glasses daily, and they really do keep things hotter and colder for longer than the competition. In my opinion, at least an hour longer. Stanley has supported the show for a while, and I want to keep it that way. So I'm asking for your help. What I want you to do is use my code with Stanley to save 30% on the best products on the market. What you need to do is head on over to stanley-pmi.com and go shopping. They have so many products over there, and hopefully I'll have one of everything at some point in my life. But you need to go shopping over there. You enter the code DRINKFAST, that's all one word, at checkout. You're going to get 30% off your Stanley stuff, and it helps the podcast as well. So thank you very much for that. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon, another brand that I love. And I know I said it about Stanley and I'm saying it about 10 Barrel, and both of those things are true. With 10 Barrel, they support so many different things in ski, snowboard, and bike that when I went to the store before they even sponsored the podcast, I would buy 10 Barrel just because of that. And then when they started sponsoring me, I realized exactly how much they actually do for action sports. They have an A-list team of athletes across ski, snowboard, and bike. They have a big money event series in their Hella Big Air events, and they give back money to the Surfrider Foundation and protect our winners. They do so much, and they have a beer for everyone. I find myself drinking a lot of Profuse Juice, a hazy IPA. Next time you're at the store, I encourage you to pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel and support the beer that supports the active mountain lifestyle more than anyone, the 10 Barrel Brewery. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. You guys are already in Utah at this point, so sponsorship's starting to work out for all of you, it sounds like. Are you and Mike a package deal with a lot of things at first?
No, not really. My brother, like I said, he was really naturally talented, had really good style, but he had bad luck with injuries. He had a compression fracture in his back for like 2 years, didn't know it, and that was always affecting him. And then he had a compression fracture again in his back, and he had this one concussion that kept him out of school. He actually had to take that whole semester over because he failed all his classes.
Oh, man.
He got a park handicap that year. So he always had like all these things. So he's just not really interested in the park anymore. So we moved to Utah, and we called him Big Mountain Mike for a while because we would all be trying to do handrails because we got on Tech 9 and we're filming for the Tech 9 videos, kind of filming, like stupid kids who have no idea what they're doing.
Do you get some clips in it?
Yeah, I had clips in the first one, Represent, and the second one, Gen Pop.
Nice.
We had an FSC section that year, and then we also had a Tech 9 FSC commercial in like one of the video games. They didn't even tell us about it. We just bought the video game, and then there was an FSC commercial in it.
Sick.
Yeah, so my brother, he was out free riding, and he got super gnarly at free riding, but no one knew because he was just doing it. So he would get hooked up, but it was never a package deal. Like it was always separate, and then sometimes he would end up getting stuff that I was getting also, but through merit and relationship.
Yep. And I could talk about your snowboarding more, but I'm not going to because there's so much more. Like you said, you were a darkman behind the scenes. You did a lot of things. So we'll just say that at that point in your career, things are starting to happen more for Nima than everyone, but things are happening. And your third year out there, it's a bad winter, and it's like you and Mike have to figure out life. You move back to California, you end up at Cal State Fullerton, and at that point in your life, are your parents funding you, or are you having to work to make this happen and take out loans? How does the financial portion of your life work?
So our parents like had our backs. Like
Awesome.
That goes back to like what I was saying at the beginning, like the reciprocity. Like they've never given me any reason not to be like as good as I could to them because they always take care of us. Like people talk about privilege and stuff right now, and we were, I would say, not like super privileged. We weren't rich, but we were privileged in the classic sense of the word privilege. Like I had a charming life because my dad and my mom worked really hard to make a charming life for us. So yeah, our parents took care of us on schooling. They even paid for my cousin to live out there 1 year, which was awesome.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so we were focusing on school. Actually, maybe backs up one more thing on the snowboarding.
Sure.
When I got in K2, sorry, I keep saying K2.
Sims, yeah, it's all right.
You understand why I say K2.
Yeah.
But got in Sims and went to a photo shoot right away. And Whitey McCockney, who made like the Kingpin videos.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite videos, number one. And he was like excited about my writing during that shoot.
He was saying during that shoot, where's Lance? Where's Lance? And you were the only guy he wanted to shoot.
Yeah, he was just, it was surreal. It was fake, basically. But he was excited about my snowboarding. I think just because I was like a new guy, and I think he liked to bring people up. And gave me his phone number and was like, call me. And I never called him because I didn't think I was ready. I thought I had to learn a few more things. That's the wrong move.
No, that's like the dumbest thing you can possibly do.
Dumbest thing, yeah. Yeah, don't do that if anyone has an opportunity. So yeah, I never called him, and I could have been in Happy Hour, which was like a pretty popular movie at the time. But so, yeah, so that was kind of, I never...
Your career could have been totally different. That was a fork in the road where if you have a regret in your snowboarding, it's probably that you didn't call Whitey. Because if you did, who knows what would have happened? Because a lot more people would have seen you from his movie, which at that point is one of the big movies that's out there. And you would have been in it. You would have been the young up-and-comer. That doesn't happen. And you probably regret that a little bit.
You know, I regret it from the standpoint that I recognize that was a bad decision. But no part of me, even at the time when I came to that point where I'm like, all right, I'm going to move back to California. I'm going to finish school. I'm going to focus on school, and I'm not going to pursue the snowboard thing anymore. Even at that point, I recognized that I don't want to be a pro snowboarder. Not that I didn't want to keep progressing. I saw being a pro snowboarder, it could, if you're not smart, like stunt what you want to do moving forward, right? And so we moved back to California to finish school. So I went to Cal State Fullerton, moving in with my parents. Still snowboarded, not just as much because, it's hard to go 100 plus days when you're living in California. But yeah, changed my whole trajectory and focused on school.
You graduate from school, and that's around 2005. And for a lot of people, there's a lot of uncertainty what they're going to do after school, and they're going to try to get a job that they love, but it's probably not something that's going to happen for them. But for you, you're able to secure a dream job as a team manager at K2 within a year of getting out of school. These jobs aren't ones that people can just normally apply for. How do you end up landing the gig with K2?
Yeah, so I graduated and I was interviewing and trying to get other jobs, but if it didn't feel right, I wouldn't take it. So I actually worked construction with my dad for a year, I guess. And then the K2 thing happened because I was talking to Brian Fox. I don't know if he was in Big Bear or on the phone. I think he called me.
He was on K2 at that point, right?
He was on K2. Yeah, he was at AM. And he called me and he told me that Ryan Runke left. Or no, it wasn't Ryan Runke. It was Kevin. No, it was Ryan. So Runke left to go work for, I think, Red Bull or something. And he's like, you want to do it? I'm like, yep. And Brian Fox is he could be like me in that, if we want to get something done, we'll be kind of bullish about it. So Brian just was pushing me. I applied. I had the owner of Active at the time write a letter of recommendation, but apparently a bunch of people came out the woodworks, and I got an interview there, and everyone was trying to get this job because K2 is the second biggest brand next to Burton. And team manager is kind of an entry-level job, but it's second to being a pro snowboarder.
Yeah, it's you're a rock star and the lowest paid person in the building all at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And it really is a good entry-level job, too, because you network and meet so many people. So I fly down there for the interview, and in my head, I'm like, this is my job to lose. No one's getting this job for me.
Yep.
So I have the interview, and then after, at lunch, Tudor was working there. He was the board engineer.
Yep.
And me and him were friends already. He pulls me aside because I think he knew that this is probably going to work. And he's like, hey, it rains every day. I'm like, yeah, I love the rain. He's like, no, dude, it rains every day. Because he's from Tahoe, where there's more snow and probably more rain, but still pretty similar to where I'm from.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I love rain too, man. It's bad. I'm like, whatever. But then, yeah, maybe a week later, Danielle called me and I got the job. But his warning was a fair warning.
No, it does rain up here a lot. And you get on the program, you inherit a solid group of riders. I think Austin Smith is one of the AMs on the team that you're really pushing to get to be pro. Why doesn't that happen?
So what happened with K2 is I came in with a vision. And I think that's probably ultimately what landed me the job is, okay, there's all these really great pros. But I was like, what are you doing with your AM? You have Austin Smith, and then there's other people, but there's nothing going on. There's no movement. There's no direction. And so I was like, I want to really build up your guys' AM program. So I get in, I put together a budget, and I put together who I want and what I wanted for each person. And so it was Austin. I wasn't going to try to turn him pro at that point, but I wanted to give him money.
Yep.
So Austin, and then Matt Edgars was already on. And Matt Edgars, he's so sick, but he's a Misty Mountain man. And he came correct. He came to the office when I first started, and I think we had mutual friends, so I think he had some sort of initial trust in me. And comes in, and he shows me everything he's doing, everything he's done, and everything he's going to do. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take this guy at his word, and I'm going to have faith in him. So I had Austin and Matt. I was talking to Joe Sexton.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had, do you know Louis Paradis?
Yep.
So those are my four guys. And I talked to all of them. They're all down. And at the time, Louis was nobody. I saw a teaser for this video Bandwagon, which kind of put him on the map. And I saw 2 tricks of him. And I was like, this is the best rail rider in the whole world.
Huh.
And at the time, he was only getting Burton flow. I think he had 1 board a year from someone. And so I had it all lined up. But I think they just weren't ready to invest in it, which is totally fine. they make their decisions, I make my decisions, right? Like we all have our role to play. But I was bummed because if I could have done that and had all four of those dudes locked in as like legit AMs, because there's other AMs, right? Because in snowboarding, it's not as clean cut as in like skateboarding all the time, where an AM is just like kind of your flow guy in snowboarding. So there's other AMs, but those four guys were going to be my guys, and it was a really good mix. But they only had enough money for Austin. So Joe ended up going and leaving and doing Stepchild, which is a great decision for him because he was in their video, which made him blow up.
Yep.
Matt Eggers, I think he wasn't tangible enough in where he rode. So, man, I wish that would have worked out because he would have been fun. He would have been a really fun pro snowboarder. And then Lewis got in Solomon, which was really great for him. So what I wanted to do didn't happen, but Austin worked out.
Okay. And then when you look at K2, it's your first time getting behind the curtain, and you seem like a dude who's into core brands, I would think. Mm-hmm. And K2 is a big brand that sells to everyone. Being at a big brand, is it frustrating to you, some of the decisions that are made? Or is it, you're just a sponge and soaking everything up?
Both. I'm not stupid. I knew it was going to go in and it wasn't going to be, people were going to see eye to eye to me and whatever. And some of the big stuff is awesome. There is opportunity to do the things I want to do. I really liked everyone I worked with. Like, like everyone there was really cool.
Yep.
The one thing that was hard for me was that when I'm talking to other snowboarders, there's certain assumptions in the way I speak and the words I use and how I talk and the things I talk about that you can make with other snowboarders. But not everyone at K2 were necessarily snowboarders. They might snowboard when they're on the hill, but they weren't snowboarders. So that made it really hard from like a purist standpoint. It didn't bother me in that like I was mad at work or anything. Like I said, I really, really to this day love everyone I worked with, but it did make it hard. But still, it's like if I wanted to go somewhere, if I wanted to do something, I could do it. So it was overall positive. But there's some things like this one, and I won't name names. I care less about contests, right? Like I think contests are a thing where if you win the contest, then that's awesome for you because you made money. But people who go and do like, air quotes, the circuit, I don't get it. I just don't get it. I don't understand. Like now there's Olympics, like, okay, there's some sort of like bigger goal, but I personally don't get it. Now, if someone else likes it and if someone else wants to do it, I think that's totally fine. But for me, like I care more about the culture and doing things that will be interesting in 5 years. Because if you won the US Open in 5 years, that's not that interesting. But if we could pop in your video part from 5 years ago, that's interesting.
But don't you think contests at some point do create the path for you to be able to live that life of the video part? Like if you do the circuit and do well at a bunch of things, you're able to create a salary and hopefully get video parts elsewhere if you're into that. I mean, there's some people that just compete, and I guess that's the mentality that you might be talking about. But I feel like contests do create opportunity for people where they might not be noticed or seen anywhere else. For
sure. That's why I said I think contests are great if you win and you win money. Like,
yeah, true.
For that person, like sick. And also, we're talking about 25-year-old Lance. I turned 40 this year. And I still like, to me, contests or whatever. Like even now, like with Instagram and stuff, like, I'm looking at all these more skaters and all these kids are like posting like their Instagram stuff. And it's like, I don't know how good you are if I'm going to assess your talent. Like until I see you skate in the streets, saying with somewhere, like if you're doing really cool stuff in the park, that doesn't give me the information I need to assess you as a snowboarder.
Yep.
Like I want to see you on the mountain and I want to see you hitting whatever, not necessarily rails at this point, but in the street. And content is the same. And also at the time, like someone to get a checkout or a full interview in the magazine and they have bibs on in every image. So I was just being annoying.
I totally see it.
Yeah.
I don't think the competition side is the coolest side of it all. I mean, if you could pick one or the other, it's definitely whatever's creative and having freedom and making the sport look good, not hucking whatever spin you can to win 15 grand. So I get where you're coming from for sure.
Yeah. But so at the time I could go to all those contests. That's what was really good, right? So me going to the US Open, going to the X Games, going to all these things, like going to the X Games is a cool experience. What was really cool about the X Games is that there are certain runs that you had to have the credentials. And once one of the contests is going on, everyone's watching, no one's snowboarding. So I would just keep snowboarding and had runs to myself. But I'm meeting all these people, like the Pat Bridges and all these people of the world, all the media people. Just because you're all going to the same stuff, you become like homies with them. And that creates that trust so that everyone that's doing these things can kind of move in and out of the snowboard world in the way they want to make things they want to happen. So it was a really positive experience. Like, I don't knock K2 in any way during my years there.
No, I think everybody goes there and grows a lot and just learns so much. But you're at a point in your career where you're only a year in, and your crew, everyone's crushing it. Your brother's like the lead designer over at Planet Earth. Nima's a pro snowboarder, but he ends up blowing his knee filming for We the People. And while you guys had always talked about starting something when you guys are living in Utah, now is the time where Nima's got a shit ton of time on his hands to think about it. And is the time on his hands what creates the idea for Ashbury? Does he call you guys up and is like, hey guys, it's time to start something. Let's quit our jobs and do it. How does that all come together? Because you quit your job really quick and went and started something.
Yeah, I'd say I was pretty stupid about it. So what happened was my brother and I, we always had an unreasonable amount of confidence. We were ready to go, but no one else was ready, which totally makes sense. Like when we started Ashbury, we were 26 years old. Like I look at a 26-year-old now and I'm like, don't start your Ashbury. Like, so we were ready to go. And then Nima blew his knee out and he's out with like Jordan Mendenhall and John Cooley and a bunch of our friends who were popular snowboarders at the time. And we had always talked about doing something, and we always talked about doing a snowboard boot company because a couple of our friends had started this shoe company called Force, and all of our friends that grew up with were shoe designers. And so we just thought that's what we would do. But when Nima was out there, he's looking at it from a different lens because he's with a bunch of pro snowboarders every day. And there's no like eyewear sponsor that they'd be psyched on. So when he was talking to them, he kind of identified that hole in the market and then called me. And I was like, I'm down. Although actually, I was interviewing for the managing editor job at Transworld.
So you were ready to leave K2 as it was?
Yeah, I was ready to leave. Yeah, I worked really hard to try to get that job. And it kind of fell apart because really weird circumstance. So I was like, let me see what's up with this interview. And if it doesn't work out, I'm down. So it didn't work out. And we just made the decision. And I went to Jeff Matura and I told him, hey, I'm putting my 2 weeks. Because I was like, if I'm going to do this, I need to go 100%, quit my job, focus on everything, and do it. I left a week earlier than I should have because we had won Team Challenge, Transworld Team Challenge, and won a trip to El Salvador. And so Jeff's like, okay, but you have to put in a week after that trip. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to go on the trip. So I missed out on a free trip to El Salvador with like a bunch of friends. But hit the ground running, saw the hole in the market. And then every single day, we're just coming up with names and names and names. And then Nima's girlfriend at the time actually hit on Ashbury. Not because of Hate Ashbury, but through a Hate Ashbury. Like they had this Hate Ashbury book and Ashbury just sounded nice. Yeah. And we just didn't hesitate, just pulled the trigger and just ran with it. And just a lot of people want to start something, right? They want to start a business. They want to do this. They want to do that. And the thing that simplifies it, you just got to do it, right? Like you have to do it. But more so than that, it's like you just have to start moving and doing the things as if it's real.
The way that you guys started the company is different than most companies where some people are looking at sourcing product and figuring out how to do that. You guys are building websites and you have a vision of athletes that you want on. And it's like you're putting that stuff together even before you have product sourced or figured out the product part. So people are talking about Ashbury, but in reality, Ashbury doesn't exist. It's just in your heads and on the internet. That way you've created a buzz. But when you go into really starting the company and creating your first product, which I think is like a tortoiseshell goggle, how much money does it cost you? Do you each put in like 20 grand and that's how you're able to start Ashbury, or there's got to be some capital?
Well, first off, we called the dudes right away that we wanted on a team and they all said yes. And there was nothing. All it was like, hey, me and my brother and Nima are starting a goggle company. Do you want to ride for it? And they were down. It was every guy that we wanted. Like we went after the people that we wanted and we got them all just on basically our word, which was really awesome on their part. So it was all family funded. And really the money that we needed was money to build the product. Because then after that, like shipping and everything, that kind of gets figured out when people are making orders.
But you have to pony up a certain amount of investment to a factory to be able to get the product, to be able to ship it to anyone anyway.
Yeah.
That's what it costs to start a company.
Yeah.
All the marketing stuff's additional, but a lot of that is hard work and coding and stuff like that. But this is money you need.
And for marketing, that's why I started a blog. Because for me, it was really important. I knew we had no money. but I knew what would work is if we created a culture around the brand. So I started literally just a blog spot. It was funny because I didn't think I was doing anything special, but I was just doing whatever I could. And so I was posting every day of all the people we were around. And we were really inclusive, not inclusive the way people use inclusive now, like inclusive as in like, it's not just our riders. You know, before Louis was on, if he was around, I treated him as far as marketing exactly the way I treated Laurent, LMP. And just anyone that was around, even people that worked at other goggle brands, I was covering snowboarding through the lens of Ashbury and kind of pulled back the curtain, showed everyone what was really going on. Simple things like, oh, here's Nick Dirks golfing or whatever. And I was consistent. I did it every day. That was the one thing that really changed everything for us. I mean, we had the right people, which was huge. We had riders without even a manufacturer. We were putting out these press releases, and it was like Jordan Mendenhall, John Cooley, Maddie Ryan, LMP, Joe Sexton, Desiree Melanson. And we're putting that out, and we literally don't have a goggle manufacturer. And I'm one of those people who's like kind of impervious to hate. Like, it just doesn't really matter to me. And when we put out the Jordan Mendenhall one and Transworld posted it, there's like comments, you know?
Yep.
And this is my favorite thing that anyone's ever said about Ashbury. Someone put, they're like, Ashbury's all hype and sepia tones. And our press releases, they're like old wanted posters from like the West.
Yep.
And so he was spot on. We were literally nothing but hype and sepia tones. And this dude said it as in like Ashbury's black. But man, that made me feel so good. Not that like, oh, I like when people hate on the company, but that there was someone smart enough to identify. I was like, this is sick. This guy's so funny.
Like he defined it to you almost, like where you hadn't thought about it like that.
Yeah. It was so funny. I just like, I can't hide from that. That's what it is. There's so many different things that were going on at the time because I was a 26-year-old kid who was really excited about what I was doing. Like every single day, what I did was, to me, amazing and exactly what I wanted to be doing. So there's a lot of like things in my head, and I documented so much of it that I'm kind of sporadic right now when I'm talking to you, but that's kind of how it was back then.
From the get-go, it seemed like the goggles were everywhere when you finally got them made. Were you selling a shit ton of goggles in the beginning, or was it more like giving a shitload of them away just for the exposure?
Both. I mean, we definitely had a smaller promo budget than all of our competitors, but I think there's a few things that were going well for us is we got them on the right people.
And some of those people didn't even wear goggles, though, which was funny. And it didn't matter to you guys.
A lot of them didn't. Yeah, it didn't matter. There's a lot aligning ourselves with like, it was the vision. The market that we were trying to corner almost didn't exist either. Like there's Holden.
Yep.
Holden and Kids Know. They were kind of like the beginning of whatever that shift was. But the market wasn't totally defined because all the different people that were talented and kind of making noise, it wasn't unified. And everyone's kind of spread out. So no one really knew what it looked like yet. And we came out and we targeted kind of all of them at once just by kind of being inclusive. And we marketed in such a way that just anyone that thought like us thought was cool, we're wearing it. So the riders, certain flow dudes, and then even like industry people, we just got it on the right people, not a lot of people.
Right.
And then also our goggles are really simple, black, tortoiseshell, which for some reason didn't exist, maroon, white, like simple goggles with very simple, strong branding on the straps. So it was more so not that there was more people wearing it, but each individual person wearing it stood out.
So you've got that going and the brand's picking up steam, but Ashbury's not all you're doing. You create Videograss and you're going to make movies. Was this something that you thought of from the beginning? Like, hey, we're going to start our brand. Then when we get to the right point, we'll launch a video production company and we'll help build our brand. Or is it something totally separate where you're just frustrated with the snowboard movies that are out there and you want to create your own shit?
Totally that. For me, it's not that like I hated maybe everything that was coming out wasn't necessarily exactly to my taste. But as far as I'm concerned, if you create content, skateboard or snowboard content, then I appreciate that.
Right.
But I also had my own idea of what things should look like. Like I always kind of film skating. Like I used to film with like Lee Romero and Brian Herman and all those kids back when I was like 20 or something. So I had some sort of film background. And then the way it really came about was towards the end of the year that Nick Dirks and Lewis were filming for These Days, the Transworld video, probably like 07, 08. That was the first year that Ashbury was around. So it came out after that year. And so I was up in Big Bear with Lewis and Nick Dirks, and this is the first big thing they've done, and they were both bummed. The video hadn't even premiered yet, and they're like, dude, we just feel like all this work that we put into this is going to be for nothing. We're not going to have anything to film for next year, and blah, blah, blah. And I was sitting in there with these two people who have no reason to think that they just hit a wall.
Right.
And I'm like, you dumb kids. So obviously I encouraged them and kind of put some perspective on it for them. But that was in my head. And then once the premiere season came out, I was staying at Joe Carlina's house. Lewis was there, Nick Dirks was there, like Jonas Michelot, maybe Ben Billock. I forget who, a bunch of people were there. And that sentiment was still kind of around. And there wasn't, for what was going on in snowboarding, there really wasn't a landing spot for everyone. And Lewis is someone who only says something if he has something to say.
Okay.
Like, he doesn't just like BS a lot, right?
Sure.
I trust him. Not that I didn't trust Nick Dirks or any of those kids, but I knew I can count on how he'd respond to this. So I didn't ask him like face to face. I like typed into my iChat. I typed, if we made a video, would you film for it? And I just went, like, turned the screen and showed him. And he kind of cocks his head and looks at it. And he kind of cocks to the other way and looks at me out the side of his eye. And he barely nods yes. So I was like, all right, we just got the best dude to say yes. So I hit up Nima. I would probably hit up Nima and Mike, but I was like, hey, Lewis said if we made a video, he'd film for it. So at this point, it's kind of an Ashbury video. So Nima talks to Jordan and John, and they're like down too. They ultimately ended up filming for the Mac Dog People movie.
Yep.
But the way we worked, we started making moves instantly. So probably within 3 days of that conversation with Lewis, or whatever you want to call that, we had a bunch of the writers verbally commit. I'd already talked to sponsors. I had some verbal kind of like agreements to spending money. So it was kind of us not being afraid to make a move and always wanting to do it. And circumstance, like the best guys we could have are available. Let's just do it. When you make a snowboard video, you don't necessarily need startup cash. Like, as long as the filmers have cameras, like, the sponsors are paying for it. But then right when that was happening, Daryl Mathis, who me and my brother and Nima were always really close to Daryl in a kind of a weird way. I think because we were like the same age and came up at the same time. I mean, Daryl was wildly successful, but him and Mikey LeBlanc were going to do another Kids Know movie, which is a Love, Hate, and Burning Bridges.
Yep.
And so they were going to bring back Kids Know. And he said, called Nima, was like, hey, you want to film for Kids Know? And Nima was like, dude, we're going to make a video, and this is who's filming for it. And Daryl's like, oh no, because it kind of got in the way of their plan. And we were kind of like, oh no, too, because it's Daryl and Mikey LeBlanc. He was my favorite snowboarder for a long time when I grew up, and he's really a good, and so is Daryl actually. But Daryl wasn't this at that point, but they're both really good examples of how you can be a leader in the pro snowboard world as you get more towards the end of your career.
For sure.
And they called the next day and they're like, hey, do you guys just want to make a video together? And we're like, yes, yeah, we do, of course. Because it wasn't a money grab. Nothing we did at that point was a money grab. In fact, nothing I've ever done has been a money grab. It's always been just like, oh, I think we could do this, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, me and my brother, Nima, Daryl, and Mikey started it. And then we fought a little bit over who the filmer would be. And then we brought in Justin Meyer, who obviously was the right decision. Yeah, and we started Videograss. And that was straight up just passion project. Like, I made pretty much no money off Videograss personally, because all the money went back into it and to pay the filmers and whatever. But just to be able to do that was insane.
And it seems like that was successful from the get-go, just like Ashbury was pretty much. But your role there, I believe, is selling sponsorships more so, because you don't have that much time, I wouldn't think, because you've got Ashbury, you've got all these ideas, you've got Videograss, but selling sponsorships. In one of the movies that you made, you sold almost $500,000 worth of sponsorships.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember you as the dude who was cold calling and asking people for money. How comfortable are you doing that? And is it true you raised $500,000 for one of your movies?
I hate sales. I hate it. I hate it so much. But I think one year we got $400K for a video. So I hate sales. In fact, that's what I was doing at the Berrics before I did here. And love all those people I worked with, but I just don't like that position.
Is that why you left the Berrics? We'll get that part of the conversation now. You hate sales and you didn't want to be there anymore, even though it was cool?
Yeah, pretty much. I just need to move on. I like marketing.
Okay.
But the way I could do sales and do it okay is just by being honest and bringing something of actual value to them.
Sure.
And if I have a good relationship with the people, like they trust me. So when we started Videograss, if I'm calling the sponsor, they in general felt like, okay, Lance said he's making a video. This is who's doing it. Then I trust that this can be something cool. So I'm willing to put my money down to it. So yeah, it wasn't hard, but yeah, you're right. I shouldn't be the guy who's cold calling people. That's not who should be doing it. But yeah, that was my role there. And also there's kind of brand direction, making sure things are right and kind of helping put together the right personnel. But mostly it was just bringing the money.
Okay. And we've been going for a while, so I'm going to fast forward a little through Ashbury. So heading back over to Ashbury, the line starts evolving and everyone knows who the brand is now.
Mm-hmm.
You're selling a lot more products. You've got sunglasses out there. There's different molds that are being created, and you guys are doing great things. But the most interesting part about it, to me, at least I think it's interesting, is that your offices were down on Skid Row, and that has to create crazy experiences like all the time. What's the wildest shit you saw on Skid Row?
First off, it wasn't as bad as it is now. Downtown LA is certain parts have gotten really nice in the last 10 years and certain parts are really, really bad. But yeah, we were in Skid Row. So we were kind of used to it. Like I only felt alarmed one time really. But when our riders would come into town, like it was really, really entertaining to see them, kind of the culture shock to be around that because it's a rare scenario. But there was one time because we had a little side parking lot and we heard like all this screaming when you go out, and there's this two homeless people who, most of the people who are homeless are like, they're smoking crack. So they're a couple, it's kind of hard to tell how old they are too.
Okay.
But they seem older and they're like fighting in our parking lot. And the dude wasn't like beating her up because then that would have escalated really quickly. But they're screaming and then she's on the ground and she's got her arms wrapped around his leg. And he's trying to get out, but he's being way too aggressive with her. And so I run over. I'm like, hey, you need to just leave. Don't talk to her. Just leave. And he starts like pushing her head down. And I'm like yelling. I'm like, yo, don't push her. Don't push her head. Just pull your leg out. You could pull your leg out. Just get it out. And then she wasn't making it any better either. And they're just screaming. And it was wild. And then finally, I don't know how I made it happen, but he leaves and he starts walking away. And then the cops come and I think they went and found him. And then she was like all laying on the ground, upset. Like she was okay, but she was just emotional. That was wild. And then our last day at the office before we moved out of the Skid Row one, I shared the office with a friend who had like a high-end fashion brand.
Okay.
And him and one of our designers, they run downstairs and like, Lance, Insta. I'm like, what? Why is he yelling at me to look at Instagram? And I look at Instagram, I'm like, I don't see what he's talking about. So I go out there and apparently there was two people having sex on my friend's car. And I think they wanted me to go out and take a photo or something. That was our exit from Skid Row, yeah.
All right, well, I guess that's a happy ending. Now I'll talk about not so happy endings, because when I look at the brand on paper, you don't look to be a part of Ashbury anymore. And it's a brand you put your heart and soul into. Mm-hmm. Can you look at things now from a 30,000 foot view and see where things started going south?
Oh, for sure, yeah. One thing is that we were 26. We didn't know what we were doing. Our focus wasn't on money and it was on culture. You know, maybe I didn't make a lot of money and maybe I'm even in a lesser financial situation than I should be if I would have made other decisions.
Sure.
But I also was able to, in my opinion, and maybe some people who listen to this maybe disagree, but in order to have like a substantial positive effect on the culture of your favorite thing in the world means something to me. And so that was our goal at the time, which is awesome. But I wasn't experienced enough to realize that we need to be trying to make money as well. And not that we ever operated at a loss or anything, but we just weren't as smart about the business as we should have been. So that's number one. And then even though me and my brother and Nima were really good friends, me and Nima specifically, we have like a really good chemistry as like friends, but we probably weren't the smartest business partners. I think we have different goals and ethics and stuff, and it just didn't work out. And ultimately we just went in different directions.
Is he still involved with the brand?
No, none of us are. We all own a small percentage.
Okay.
And I make myself available to the dudes running it, this guy Jason out in Canada, if they want to pick my brain, but it's almost zero involvement.
Are you still friends with Nima?
Not really.
Okay. So there was internal conflict, money, and there was difference in philosophy and vision too.
Yeah, just a lot of differences. And it hit wrong in a lot of different ways. And unfortunately, that's what happened. If we didn't start Ashbury together, I'd probably still be friends with him. I even sometimes get nostalgic about it. I'm like, man, we got along so well. But it is what it is. I don't look in the rearview mirror too much. But I mean, we did a lot of great things. I mean, great in some context.
No, you did. You definitely left your mark on the snowboard world for sure. At that time, Videograss is about to close down as well. I think your last movie is Videogracias, and you're moving away from it, and you must know that. Is it just a sign of the times, like the media is not what people are buying anymore? Or is it just time to move on?
Well, with Videograss is different. I stopped producing the videos after Dark Side or something. Or once Joe Colino stopped doing them. Because Joe Colino was doing Transworld videos, and then he called me upset one day. Not upset, like unhappy with how things were at Transworld. Not that he had issues with the Transworld people. He just, it is. That's how people want to start their own thing. And so he wanted to join us at Videograss. So then Joe and Justin are both making movies. And then me and then Mikey, we are the main ones bringing in the money. And then Daryl helped. And then once Joe left, Justin Meyer, who never owned a piece of Videograss, he was just the director.
Yep.
So Justin just took it all. He took all the workload of producing the movie because even though he didn't own it, he was the soul, the life. He was Videograss. And no matter how many positive contributions I or Mikey or my brother, even creatively, or anyone, Daryl, Nima, no matter how much we did, Videograss was still Justin. So once he took over, and not in a bad way, he just started doing it himself. At some point, I think it was Mikey who brought up the idea, like, why don't we just gift him all of our shares? And so I stopped working on it years ago.
Okay.
And then more recently, we gave him the company.
Okay. So you're pretty much out of snow at that point. And over the years, I think you did some team management and consulting for crew. You created a lot of video and photo projects for different people. But your next big thing is the Berrics. And we talked about the Berrics. It's like Eric Costin, Steve Barras. I don't know what you want to call it. We'll just call it Project. And you're selling stuff for them. You don't like selling, and we've established that that's why you left. But one thing I've noticed is that usually when you're in a place where there's a lot of pro skaters, pro snowboarders, pro whatever coming in and out of the doors, there are guys, in some cases happen to be guys that are suits as well, usually the sales guys selling shit, and they're treated differently. Is that how it was at the Berrics, where you were like the business guy who was just doing the work and everything else was cool up front? Or how did that work?
I think I managed it pretty well to not be that. I try my best to understand when I'm asking someone to do something that they don't want to do. In my opinion, I tried to make sure that when one of my guys had to do something that maybe wasn't as cool as they want to do, that I made sure that I understood that is the case. So I think it was fine. And as far as like in the skate park, I just hold a different place in skateboarding than I do in snowboarding. And I'm not a personality in skateboarding. I'm not someone that people know unless you know me, And so there, I was in the skate park all the time because I'd skate or I'd go hang out. But I was friends or friendly with the people that I was friends or friendly with. And I wasn't interjecting myself. Like if you watch the Berrics, you're not going to see me. I stayed off the camera. I was pretty incognito. And I think for the most part, I didn't create any sort of like bad will as the sales guy, which you totally could do.
Yeah, for sure. So you end up leaving that job and you've got another dream job. It's like you keep you've earned yourself the ability to get these amazing jobs. Now you're at Element and you're the marketing manager of the Americas. You've been there for like 5 months and you're back to a big brand. You're back to marketing. So you can create the playbook, which could all change now with the pandemic and who knows what's going to happen with retailers. So it will be interesting, but stoked on the new gig? I guess you have to say you are because you're new.
Yeah. Don't fire me, whoever's listening to this. No, yeah, dude, I'm stoked because for me, there's a few things that going into this one that I wanted to make sure is one, I didn't want to be the team manager. And two, I wanted to make sure that lifestyle stuff was important because I know that in order for a company to be like really successful, they have to care about more than just skateboarding. So yeah, I think it's really awesome. I think there's a lot of really good opportunity. It's going to kind of take me a while. I want to earn my voice in the company.
Yeah.
And one of my goals right now that I'm trying to get done I got furloughed when all this happened.
Okay.
Because it happened pretty quickly when I started there. And when they have to make cuts, the new marketing guy who doesn't know all the processes or even the products, I was way too easy. I saw it coming a mile away.
Yeah.
But I'm starting again tomorrow. I'm on a photo shoot on the desert and stuff. One of the things I'm focusing on right now is I want to make sure, because I think a lot of people in skateboarding, they don't always, or not just skateboarding, just in general, any sort of like action sport, there's not always a strategy or direction or goal with the skateboard program or the snowboard program or whatever. And sometimes there is a strategy and there's a goal and they don't align because they're not really thinking about what it means, right?
Yeah.
So right now I'm trying to look at what we got and look at what we could have and look at what our goal is and then create a strategy for that in two different ways. Like one, just for skateboarding itself, because I think you need to add value to the culture to be taken seriously by the people who make the decisions within the culture. And then also for the business. And I think that if we can really nail down the skateboard direction and strategy for skateboarding itself, then that will help everything else that we do that is adjacent to skateboarding. And so to me, that's like the fun part. And that's what I'm trying to work on. And it's not super easy, but the longer I'm there, even during my furlough, because I've been kind of keeping tabs on things.
Yep.
It's just fun. It's a nice challenge. It's a kind of challenge that I like as opposed to trying to sell people on partnership deals.
Yeah, I can imagine. So that's your career. It's been really amazing. But at this point in the show, I have something that I call inappropriate questions.
Oh, no.
I'm going to get someone that we both know. He's probably your best friend up here in Seattle. And I say that because he said that in his inappropriate question. But his name is Jared Garrison, and he is a graphic designer, freelance guy, got all kinds of ideas, an awesome dude. One of my favorite people that I never see anymore. And he came up with 3 questions for you. So I'm going to jump into the first question right now.
So day 1 at K2, you're on the ferry. You get detained by security for terror suspicions for taking photos of some pretty weird shit. You want to tell us what that was?
I don't remember that.
You don't remember taking photos of the toilets of the ferry and the police?
I did take photos of the toilets. What was that?
I think that's what Jared wants to know. What was that?
Dude, I don't remember what that was. It must have been something gross.
He said that you were taking photos of the toilets in the ferry boat. There must have been something gross in it. And that the police or the ferry security or someone came and started questioning you about it.
I don't remember that. I mean, I partly remember. I have a really bad memory. I've had 10 concussions. My mom and I actually were just talking about that. I don't know if it's related.
If they make you forget about taking pictures of toilets full of disgusting things and having the police talk to you?
I know one thing at that time. I was taking a lot of photos of toilets in general. That's probably what it was. At that time, I wanted to take a bunch of interesting toilet photos to print and frame for my bathroom.
Okay.
And I think that's what it was. And I think it was the urinal on the ferry.
The stainless steel ones?
Yeah. There's something about it. And it was probably super gross at the time. And I was just young and stupid and just oh, the gross toilet is cool. That is random.
Totally random. We'll go with question number 2.
I was talking with Mike, and Mike says that you can't catch anything, but all I ever hear you talking about is how many bass and how big your bass are. That's what's up.
So I guess that doesn't really sound like a question.
It's an allegation.
Yeah, it's just saying that you think that you catch a lot of fish, and you say that you catch a lot of fish, but you don't. But then he ended that thing with Bass What's Up. And I think that was like a company or some kind of project of yours. What is Bass What's Up?
Bass What's Up is a fishing crew that I started, and it kind of caught some steam. And we're actually, my brother and that guy Nate are kind of messing around with it again now.
Like a fishing crew?
A fishing crew, yeah. It was like my brother and I, cousin, another friend, and my dad. But as far as not catching fish, my brother does get annoyed because I'll talk some smack to him when we're fishing. But the reality is, and this is me being totally objective, I usually am the first one to catch the fish. And I'm more likely than he is to catch the biggest and the most.
All right, well, at least you're humble.
And that's not me being bragging or anything. It is what it is.
All right, I'm going to go with Jared's last inappropriate question.
When I first met you in Seattle, I was probably your best friend in town because you didn't know anybody and you didn't drink. And then I'd run into you at SIA a couple years later. Actually, it might have only been a year later. And we're throwing back beers at a concert. Like, who starts drinking at 26?
So that's a great question. I remember you didn't drink, you didn't smoke, you didn't do anything, and that was totally fine. What you did do was stop eating chocolate for Lent, for like whatever Lent is. And so I figured that you probably were a dude who was never ever going to drink in his life. But then Jared, when I was talking to him, he was like, yeah, no, I was drinking with him at SIA. Did you start drinking very late in life?
So I didn't drink when I was a kid. Like, my parents raised me a certain specific way. I grew up Catholic in a good way, like not in like some weird overbearing way. And then I knew that if I drank, it would be to make other people happy and not myself. It'd be just giving me the peer pressure, and it wouldn't be me drinking. It would be me appeasing my friends drinking, which is not me.
Okay.
Then as I got older and I didn't have any bad habits or whatever, I just started to drink a little bit, and I don't drink all the time. That's just not who I am. So yeah, I think when I was like 26, but it's like, you'll never catch me drunk. You'll never catch me hungover. But like, yeah, I'll have like a beer or two with Jared at a concert. I don't know what he's talking about, but I miss that dude. Jared's the best. He's consistent. He's super funny, and he's just easy for me to get along with. And I just really click with him. And I went over his house one time, and he maybe went over to my house one time. And we literally lived, like, I could have thrown a rock and broke his window from my door. So strange.
You did work with him and spend like many hours on an island with him.
Sure.
But that's the podcast, man. So while I only see you and talk to you every couple years, and it's usually not memorable because we were never like the greatest of friends, but we were always friends.
Mm-hmm.
I saw your first job in the real world, and you had no real idea of what was going on. And now you kind of know everything. I mean, you've been all over the place. You've seen and you've done so much. And I think the success from you has come from not only working your ass off, but also being a dude who's known for like cultivating culture and bringing people together in a way that's unique to you. Like no one else does it like Lance. And that's a cool thing to see grow, because I didn't see it in the beginning in year one, but you always had that vision. And I've been able to see it play out amongst different companies, and now we'll see it with Element. And I thank you for your time, man.
I appreciate it. I definitely don't know everything, but I definitely appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
And yeah, dude, hopefully I'll see you soon.
So that was time with Lance Hakker, and while I've worked with a lot of people who went on to do some cool shit, things were different with Lance, as he was so green when he came to K2. He seemed shy, and I expected him to stay at K2 for a few years, soak up a lot of information, and then take on the world. I mean, he really was so quiet in the beginning that I didn't expect him to bounce after a few months and start the goggle company for the cool kids. Honestly, if you asked me to describe Lance back then, cool wouldn't be one of the words I use. I liked him, but square, quiet, shy, nice, and for sure talented when it comes to board sports would be how I described him. But listening to him and looking at his body of work, I feel like the K2 days is where Lance gained his confidence, and then he hit the ground running with everything else he's been a part of. He's worked with the right people, and in the timeline of snowboarding history, Ashbury and Videograss will be remembered, which means Lance Hakker will forever be a part of the snowboard industry. That's the podcast for this week. I want to thank you for listening, ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement, reach out to me with any questions or concerns. My email is mike@thepowellmovement, and I will get back to you. Finally, I want to ask you to drink more 10 Barrel out of Stanley pint glasses, and have a great week, everyone.